So, where you from, man?
Woodtown, Oak Cliff.
Rapper Montana 700 just got slammed with federal charges, and the internet is going wild. Investigators claim he wasn't just dropping bars about the grind. He was actually living it. They say Montana was out here moving real weight while flaunting designer chains, cars, and stacks on camera. What once looked like a classic, from the trenches to the top success story, has exploded into a full-scale federal operation. And word is, the feds have been clocking his every move for months, especially after his homie Zillionaire Doe got tangled up in his own case first. Before the flashing lights, mugshots, and court dates, Montana was just another kid trying to survive the concrete jungle of South Dallas. In his world, every dollar was earned the hard way. Every step could turn deadly, and every decision mattered. There were no shortcuts, no easy blessings, just raw hunger and ambition driving him forward. Growing up broke, Montana didn't have privilege or connections, but he had that fire, that unstoppable drive to make it out no matter the cost. Whenever someone asked where he came from, Montana didn't hesitate for a second. He'd shout it with pride. Woodtown, Oak Cliff. That name meant something. It wasn't just a location. It was a statement of survival and power. He grew up learning the game from neighborhood legends, watching how they moved, flipped, and built empires out of nothing. In those streets, trapping wasn't a hobby. It was school, and every lesson was paid for in blood, risk, and loyalty. While most of his peers were still chasing school credits or trying to land part-time jobs, Montana was already stacking serious money. The streets whispered his name like a myth.
Stop saying, y'all. Hey, stop. You can work too hard for this shit, man. Work too hard. Hey, Alabama, they finna now free my boys, man. You good. Don't worry. They finna come get you, big sir. They can't get my nigga a break around this hoe.
He's not just selling small bags, he's running real operations. That's when his legend began. Long before the internet ever heard his music, the blocks were already echoing his story. He earned respect because he wasn't just talking that talk, he was walking it. But that kind of reputation? It's a dangerous crown to wear. The same fame that turned him into a local hero also made him a prime target. The streets might have loved him, but the authorities started circling like hawks. Cops began asking questions. Detectives started knocking on doors, and suddenly, Montana's name was in too many reports to ignore. The very hustle that built his image, money, power, and respect, has now become the trap that could end it all. The higher he climbed, the brighter the spotlight burned. And now the light that once made him shine might be the same one that exposes everything. Local police had been watching Montana 700 long before the feds even stepped in. His name wasn't new. It was a familiar echo in Dallas precincts, whispered between detectives during briefings, and murmured across street corners late at night. But what set Montana apart from every other hustler chasing the grind wasn't just his product. It was his presence. He didn't move quiet or play low-key. He carried himself like a man untouchable, with a confidence so loud it could silence a room. Every time he popped out, whether it was a viral IG live, a slick interview dripping in diamonds, or just stepping through the hood, Montana didn't need an introduction. You felt his aura before he even spoke. He refused to blend in. He wanted to stand out. To him, being invisible was worse than being broke. He wasn't just another street figure. He was a symbol of ambition for every kid trapped in the same cycle. His energy screamed fearlessness. His attitude dared anyone to doubt him, and that raw authenticity made people listen. The streets admired it, the city respected it, and soon the internet couldn't look away. And once the attention came, the music followed naturally. Montana turned his reality into rhythm, his hustle into hits. Every bar he spit felt like a confession wrapped in melody. His tracks hit different because they weren't fiction. They were testimony. When Montana rapped about flipping packs, making moves, or outsmarting rivals, nobody questioned it because they already knew the history. He wasn't pretending for clout. He was storytelling from survival. That kind of credibility can't be bought. It's earned through scars, risk, and years of grinding in the dark. But authenticity that raw comes with a heavy price tag, because when you're still living the life you rap about, the line between expression and evidence disappears fast. The same verses that crowned him a street legend also gave law enforcement a roadmap. Detectives began noticing the eerie overlap, lyrics that mirrored unsolved cases, coded language matching local slang, and references to neighborhoods under surveillance. Every flashy chain, every car, every photo flexing cash started to look less like entertainment and more like exhibits. Behind the scenes, investigators were quietly connecting dots while the fans were quoting bars. Montana's past built his empire, but it also laid the trap. He became the voice of the block, the one who made it out just enough to inspire others. But as his fame grew, so did the target on his back. Jealous rivals whispered, Informants started talking, and federal agents began circling like vultures. The spotlight that once fed his ambition now burned too bright, exposing every move he made. And while the streets celebrated him as a hometown hero, the feds were studying him like a case study. They didn't move fast, they moved smart. The Bureau builds cases like puzzles, piece by piece, waiting for that one slip-up that seals it all. They watched, they recorded, they traced, and when Montana thought he was just living the dream, they were already writing the script for his nightmare. By the time Montana 700 started realizing how fast the world around him was spinning, he was already standing at the dangerous crossroads of two realities: the grind that built him and the rap dream that could have redeemed him. What he didn't know was that the same choices that gave him power and respect in the trenches were now turning into the exact reasons he was being hunted. Those early street decisions, the ones that earned him stripes, had become invisible chains pulling him straight into the federal crosshairs. When Montana finally traded the block for the booth, it wasn't an overnight success. It was a grind. But once it clicked, it exploded. The streets had already stamped his name long before the labels did. His authenticity wasn't marketing, it was proof. Fans didn't just listen to Montana, they felt him. They believed every bar because they'd seen the journey with their own eyes. The same people who once saw him risk it all were now seeing him rap about it, and every line hit with the force of a confession. His first tracks weren't polished club bangers. They were stories of survival, gritty lyrics about flipping packs, running from raids, and stacking dirty money-painted pictures that were too vivid to be fiction. Montana wasn't chasing radio play or industry fame, he was speaking. The language of pain, ambition, and survival. There were no luxury studios or million-dollar budgets, just Montana, his circle, and the same cracked sidewalks that raised him. That rawness made the music magnetic. It wasn't for everyone. It was for those who lived it. The visuals matched the energy. His early videos showed exactly where he came from. Corner stores, trap houses, and chain-link fences. You could almost feel the heat of the Texas sun bouncing off those streets. Fans gravitated to that energy instantly. To them, Montana wasn't performing. He was representing. Clips of him surrounded by stacks of cash, homies throwing signs, and the same hustle playing out in real time became impossible to scroll past. It was authentic, bold, and electric. People saw more than an artist. They saw hope. They saw a man who made it out by being real, not fake. That's why his buzz spread like wildfire across Dallas. Local DJs started spinning his records. Bloggers wrote think pieces about his rise, and even rival hoods began respecting his name. Montana 700 had become more than a rapper. He was a movement. Then came the connection that supercharged everything. Zillionaire dough. Once their affiliation became public, it was like gasoline on an already burning fire. Every time Doe's name hit headlines, Montana's was right beside it. Together, they were branded as the Street Kings of Texas, two self-made hustlers who flipped their pain into influence. They were living proof that you could come from nothing and still shine. But what fans celebrated as loyalty, the feds saw as association. Because when Doe's name started appearing in federal files, it was only a matter of time before Montana's did too. And he was standing front row center. As Montana's fame grew, so did the visuals. What once looked like handheld videos from the block evolved into full-blown cinematic experiences. Foreign cars lined up in convoy, ice glistening under studio lights, and money flowing like water. The aesthetic screamed power, but to investigators, it screamed evidence. What fans thought was art looked like confessionals to law enforcement. Every bar about moving pounds, every flash of unexplained wealth, every familiar face tied to known crews, each became another piece in the federal puzzle. Supporters saw authenticity. Authorities saw confirmation. Fans celebrated his truth. The feds studied it. Montana's transparency was both his biggest strength and his greatest weakness. Every verse that inspired his followers became another breadcrumb trail for the feds. To his block, Montana 700 was the definition of real. He embodied what every young hustler dreamed of: escape, success, and respect without compromise. But to investigators, he was the living embodiment of evidence in plain sight. They didn't just watch his rise, they documented it, dissected it, and waited for the day the stage lights would turn into interrogation lights. Because in the world Montana came from, success doesn't erase your past, it magnifies it. And now, the very songs that made him famous were the same ones the feds were pressing rewind on, again and again, building the case that might take everything he'd ever earned. From a music standpoint, Montana 700 was on fire. His voice carried that perfect mix of grit and control. Sharp enough to cut through any beat, confident enough to make every word hit hard. His delivery wasn't just rap, it was testimony. Every verse sounded like it came straight from a life lived in the trenches. You could almost smell the danger in his lyrics, feel the adrenaline in his flow. Each track was a movie scene, painting vivid pictures of risk, hunger, and survival that money or marketing could never fake. Soon, the whispers turned into headlines. Labels were circling, DJs were spinning his name, promoters were calling non-stop. The streets already knew he was up next, but now the industry did too. The same block that once doubted he'd make it out started claiming him as their own. For a moment, it looked like Montana was finally crossing over, from trap corners to corporate checks, from the dirt to the deal. But fame has a cruel way of dragging shadows into the light. The brighter Montana's spotlight got, the heavier his past became. Every interview, every freestyle, every performance peeled back another layer of his real life. Fans praised him for keeping it 100. But that same realness made him impossible to ignore by the wrong people. Federal agents didn't just hear the music, they studied it. They weren't clapping to the rhythm. They were writing down timestamps, catching details, connecting dots. Unlike rappers who exaggerated stories for clout, Montana didn't have to lie. Every lyric, every bar was earned through real-life scars. That was his power and his curse. Because in the rap game, being too real doesn't just get you respect, it gets you attention from the feds. His truth gave him fame, but it also framed him as a target. What the fans celebrated as authenticity, investigators interpreted as confession. Every repost, every viral clip, every shout-out pushed his name higher in the culture, and higher on federal watch lists. His rise wasn't just music, it was surveillance bait. By the time Montana started moving like a professional artist, the streets had crowned him, the blogs had noticed him, and the feds had bookmarked him. He wasn't just trending, he was being tracked. Behind the flashing lights, the story split in two. To fans, Montana 700 was the next big breakout, the voice of Dallas, the hustler-turned rapper finally getting his shot. But to federal agents, he looked like something entirely different. A calculated street boss hiding in plain sight. His lyrics, his lifestyle, his inner circle, they all lined up too perfectly with the blueprint of a federal conspiracy case already being built. Every music video was being dissected frame by frame. Every scene with cash, cars, or coded slang was treated like evidence. Agents didn't just stream his drops, they analyzed them. When Montana thought he was feeding the fans, he was actually feeding the investigation. What the culture saw as art, the feds saw as an open confession dressed up as entertainment. And that's the heartbreaking twist. Montana stood on the edge of greatness and destruction at the same time. One path led to platinum plaques, fame, and the kind of money that could have changed his whole life. The other led straight back to the cold steel reality he'd spent years escaping. The booth that once felt like freedom was turning into a courtroom soundtrack. He didn't realize it yet, but every single lyric was another brick in the case being built against him. Every flashy scene, every reference to pounds, every coded nod to the streets, it wasn't just content anymore, it was evidence. The same music that made Montana 700 a star was now becoming the soundtrack to the biggest trial of his life. Work too hard, Alabama! Free my boys, man! They finna come get you, big sir. Those were the words echoing all over social media when the story finally exploded. Fans had felt the tension building for months. Something big was brewing. And when the news hit, the internet lost its mind. Because let's be real, federal heat doesn't come out of nowhere. When the feds move, it's never guesswork. It's precision. It means they've got receipts, recordings, and a trail so solid they're ready to take it straight into the courtroom. And that's exactly what they brought against Montana 700. A full-blown federal indictment that reads like a crime documentary. Every detail, every timestamp, every coded phone call allegedly pieced together into a storyline of ambition turned danger. Sources close to the case say the official charges are no joke. Conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, possession with intent to distribute, and interstate trafficking. The kind of felonies that don't just carry years, they carry decades. According to investigators, Montana wasn't just another Dallas hustler. They claim he was running a pipeline that stretched across multiple states, a tight-knit operation moving serious weight under the radar. From Texas to Alabama, allegedly even touching parts of Louisiana, the network supposedly handled everything. Distribution, transport, and cash flow like a small underground empire. That's when it stopped being a street issue and became a federal-level case. Local authorities couldn't handle it anymore. This was now big boy territory. The feds reportedly built their case off a chain of raids and wiretaps that went down quietly months before the arrest. It started in Montana's own neighborhood. Agents raided several connected spots and found more than just small bags. They allegedly uncovered bundles of cash, loaded weapons, encrypted phones, and even ledgers that pointed to a structured operation. It was the kind of discovery that turns whispers into evidence. When all those pieces came together, the picture became clear to investigators, at least in their eyes. Montana wasn't just rapping about the game. They believed he was living it on a massive scale. And once the feds think they've got proof, they don't stop. They build, they wait, they close in. Then came the connection that made the case explode. Zillionaire Doe. The same partner in grind who had already been caught in a separate investigation. Once his block got hit and Doe's name started popping up in official reports, it was a domino effect. Federal agents began pulling phone records, tracking bank activity, and tracing every movement between the two crews. Before long, Montana's name started appearing in multiple documents, allegedly linking him to figures already being watched by higher agencies. That's when the feds switched gears from surveillance to strategy. They weren't just watching anymore. They were preparing for the takedown. What began as a few street whispers had turned into a federal narrative, with Montana 700 painted as more than just a rapper caught in the system. To fans, he was an artist telling his truth. But to prosecutors, he was the centerpiece of an organized network. And as agents stacked evidence behind closed doors, the whole city could feel it coming. Something major was about to break wide open. Here's the scary truth. The feds don't move on rumors, they move on results. They don't act out of impulse or ego. They wait until the case is locked, loaded, and ready to destroy lives. And for Montana 700, that moment finally arrived when his name appeared bold and unmistakable on a federal indictment. A single document that could decide the rest of his life with one courtroom verdict. One of the most chilling details in that indictment?
The wiretaps!
According to leaked filings, investigators had been listening for months, quietly monitoring coded conversations where Montana's name, or one of his street nicknames, kept slipping through the cracks. Agents reportedly caught snippets of talk about weight, roots, and numbers, phrases that sounded innocent to most but screamed operation to anyone who's ever studied drug cases. Even when Montana wasn't the one on the phone, his name came up enough to pull him directly into the center of a federal conspiracy. That's what makes these cases so dangerous. You don't have to be caught with a single gram or even seen near a deal. Under federal conspiracy law, all prosecutors need to do is convince a jury that you were part of the bigger picture, that you knew something, or played even the smallest role in the machine. That's decades on paper, without being caught red-handed. The streets talk about this all the time, but nobody really feels it until they see their own name in an indictment, printed next to words like conspiracy and trafficking. That's when it hits. This is real. And just when it couldn't get worse, came the part every street figure fears most: the informants. Federal cases thrive on them. The documents didn't spell out names, but insiders believe someone close to Montana flipped under pressure. When the feds start applying heat, loyalty melts fast. It's the oldest play in the book. Grab the smaller players, wave lighter sentences in front of them, and make them talk. Once one person breaks, it's a domino effect. And when those statements line up with wiretap transcripts or surveillance clips, that's game over. The prosecution doesn't need speculation anymore. They've got voices, visuals, and verification. But the feds weren't satisfied stopping there. They followed the money. Every flashy car, every diamond chain, every post of Montana sitting behind stacks of cash became part of a bigger picture. The indictment reportedly outlined a long list of unexplained income and suspicious transactions, arguing that his music career couldn't possibly fund the lifestyle he showcased. To fans, Montana's flexing was just part of the culture, the same braggadocio every rapper embraces once they taste success. But to prosecutors, those same Instagram clips and music videos were receipts. They said the lifestyle didn't add up, that the numbers didn't match, and that the money had to come from somewhere far outside the studio. Montana's jewelry, the designer fits, even the vehicles parked outside his shows. All of it was used to paint him as a man living way beyond his means. What his supporters saw as art, the government labeled evidence of laundering and illegal income. The same visuals that earned him millions of views were now being replayed in a federal office. Paused, zoomed in, and filed as exhibits. The same lyrics that gave him credibility were being dissected by prosecutors in suits, turning metaphors into proof of motive. That's when reality set in. This wasn't about clout anymore. This was the moment the music turned into evidence. And for Montana 700, the stage lights had officially turned into interrogation lights. According to inside reports, investigators followed the money. And what they found raised every red flag imaginable. The feds allegedly pulled Montana 700's bank statements and noticed a pattern too clean to ignore. Large, frequent cash deposits that just so happened to line up with the timeline of the alleged trafficking runs. Every deposit, every withdrawal, every sudden spike in balance became a breadcrumb in what prosecutors described as a financial map of criminal profit. To them, the numbers didn't just whisper suspicion, they shouted illegal proceeds, loud and clear. But the money trail was only the beginning. Agents reportedly went full throttle, diving deep into Montana's social media, music videos, and even his lyrics. Bars where he rapped about moving pounds, shipping work, or flipping loads were pulled straight from his catalog and entered into evidence. What made him a star was now being twisted into a courtroom weapon. Prosecutors called it confession through creativity, claiming his art wasn't storytelling, it was documentation. It's the same dangerous playbook that's been used in countless cases before, blurring the line between performance and participation. Instead of separating fiction from fact, they treat lyrics like autobiographies of crime. Defense attorneys will argue it's just creative expression, part of a genre built on realism and metaphor. But juries, they don't always see art, they see confession, especially when those lyrics line up with hard evidence, seized cash, recovered weapons, and actual raid reports. And when that puzzle was finally complete, the feds made their move, with zero hesitation and zero warning. After months of silent buildup, the hammer finally dropped. The arrest wasn't a rumor, it was a spectacle. No leaks, no heads up, just a perfectly executed takedown that caught everyone off guard. 1 minute Montana was trending, the next he was in cuffs. The same man who once rapped about outsmarting the system was now standing face to face with it. It all went down in the early hours of the morning, a scene straight out of a high-stakes crime movie. Federal agents, backed by local task forces, launched a pre-dawn raid on a property tied directly to Montana 700. Witnesses said it was chaos and precision all at once. Armored trucks rolled in before sunrise, cutting off the entire block. Tactical teams in black gear shouted commands as they breached doors with battering rams. Flashbangs lighting up the street while red and blue lights painted the houses in chaos. Neighbors described the sound as deafening, shouting, sirens and that chilling echo of boots pounding pavement. Within minutes, officers had the area sealed off, helicopters hovering above, and agents swarming every corner. They weren't coming to question him. They were coming to end it. Montana 700 was reportedly taken into custody without resistance, but others at the scene weren't so calm. Several individuals were detained after what witnesses called a tense standoff. Agents allegedly recovered multiple firearms, stacks of cash, and digital devices that prosecutors now claim hold critical data tying back to trafficking operations. This wasn't a random grab. It was a statement, a message to the city, the streets, and every artist still walking that fine line between reality and image. The feds weren't watching anymore. They were striking. And the takedown of Montana 700 was designed to make that clear. As the dust settled and footage of the raid started circulating online, fans were left in disbelief. The flashing lights, the armored vehicles, the SWAT-style precision. It didn't feel like an arrest. It felt like a turning point. The same rapper who embodied survival was now the centerpiece of a federal spectacle. Proof that the system had been watching, waiting, and finally decided it was time to make its move. Within just hours of his arrest, Montana 700 was handed straight over to federal custody, and prosecutors wasted zero time showing how serious they were. In the very first hearing, they pushed hard to have him held without bond, painting him as both a flight risk and a danger to the community. In federal court, those aren't just empty phrases, they're powerful weapons. And when the judge heard the arguments, there was no hesitation. The order was clear and cold. Montana stays behind bars while the government builds its case. For a rapper whose fame was just beginning to take off, the optics were devastating. The same energy that made him look untouchable now made him look like another fallen star. Headlines flipped overnight, from next up in Dallas to federal defendant in custody. The same hunger, the same ambition that once defined him, was suddenly being used to define his downfall. The world wasn't seeing Montana the artist anymore. They were seeing Montana the accused. The charges stacked against him are no small matter. We're talking career-ending, life-altering accusations. If convicted, Montana faces mandatory minimums stretching deep into decades behind bars. Just the conspiracy to distribute count alone carries a 10-year minimum, depending on the quantity. And that's before you even add the interstate trafficking enhancement. When those charges combine, the sentencing numbers start looking like life without the title. That's the kind of time that breaks men long before the trial even begins. And here's what makes it colder. The feds know this. They use those heavy numbers like leverage, not violence. They don't need to threaten when the paperwork already does it for them. It's psychological warfare. They let the weight of the indictment do all the talking. They know that most people will fold long before they ever see a jury. It's how they secure plea deals, quietly, efficiently, without lifting a finger. In the federal world, the pressure isn't shouted. It's calculated! Meanwhile, outside those courtroom walls, the streets haven't stopped buzzing since the news broke. Every corner has a theory, every post a rumor. Some claim Montana will stand tall, loyal to the code. Others whisper that maybe, just maybe, the case isn't as airtight as the feds want people to think. His supporters cling to hope, saying he'll beat it, that it's all a setup. But the veterans of the game know better. Federal prosecutors don't move unless they're certain, and the numbers don't lie. With a conviction rate over 90%, the federal system is a machine built to win. They don't gamble, they don't take risks. When they indict, it's because they believe they already have you cornered. That's the grim reality Montana 700 is now facing. One of the toughest, most one-sided battles of his entire life. What makes this story hit even harder is how fast it all changed. Just weeks ago, Montana was climbing. His videos going viral, his name buzzing across platforms, his shows packed with energy. Now he's confined to a cell, watching it all unravel from the inside. The irony is painful. The same lifestyle that gave him power in the booth, that made his lyrics real and raw, is now the very reason he could spend decades fighting for his freedom. Montana's story is the clearest reminder of how thin the line really is between rap dreams and real consequences. One moment you're the voice of the streets, the next, you're evidence in a federal case. For Montana 700, authenticity was everything. But in a courtroom, that same authenticity might be the thing that takes everything away. For his freedom, the same authenticity that built his name might be the same thing that breaks it. But the biggest question everyone's asking is, why him? Why would the feds zero in on a rapper still on the come-up instead of chasing bigger players behind the scenes? The answer comes down to visibility, influence, and control. Montana wasn't just another hustler, he was a symbol. His music had reach, his videos had views, and his name carried weight far beyond Dallas. That kind of influence threatens power structures, because when a voice from the streets starts shaping culture, it attracts more than fans. It attracts federal attention. Montana wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. He was living loud, being seen, quoted, and streamed. In law enforcement's eyes, that kind of spotlight isn't just risky, it's irresistible. Because when you move product and move culture at the same time, you're not just hustling, you're rewriting the narrative. And that's the kind of figure the feds love to make an example of. By the time they came knocking, Montana 700 had earned a reputation most rappers dream of: authenticity. He wasn't just spitting bars about trapping, he was living the life others only pretended to know. That unfiltered image made his music powerful, but it also made him a target. To prosecutors, Montana wasn't just a rapper. He was influence personified, someone who could make the next generation believe the hustle was glamorous. And in their world, influence mixed with crime equals the perfect high-profile example. In their eyes, Montana wasn't just another hustler trying to make it out. He was a cultural amplifier. His lifestyle and music spread street ideology far beyond his block. That made him valuable in a different way. Not just to fans, but to the feds who wanted to send a message. They love cases where influence meets alleged crime, because taking down someone like Montana doesn't just remove one man, it shakes the entire scene that watched him rise. Then there's the association factor, and that's where things got even stickier. Montana was closely tied to Zillionaire Doe, who was already under intense federal scrutiny after multiple raids in his neighborhood and his brother's arrest. When investigators see two names that constantly overlap, same circles, same streets, same sound, they start connecting dots, whether those dots are real or just assumptions. And in federal cases, even assumptions can put your name in paperwork. Once that happens, it's almost impossible to erase. The next hit came from the money trail. Flashy cars, designer clothes, diamond chains, and stacks of cash all over Instagram. It's a familiar look in rap, but it tells a different story to investigators. They don't see flexing, they see evidence. The rule is simple. If your income doesn't match your lifestyle, prosecutors will claim the difference is drug money. In Montana's case, reports say the feds traced bank deposits, cash seizures, and luxury purchases that didn't align with his streaming revenue or show payments. The numbers didn't add up. And in federal court, math speaks louder than music. Every dollar became a clue. Every car became a question. And every photo with a money fan turned into another puzzle piece in their story. But it didn't stop there. Social media and lyrics became weapons too. Montana's bars about moving pounds or running routes weren't seen as art. They were treated like coded confessions. Every photo flashing cash or standing beside known associates got cataloged, highlighted, and filed as evidence. What fans saw as creativity prosecutors framed as criminal confirmation. We've seen this playbook before. Cases like Young Thug's YSL indictment or Rollo's federal conspiracy charges. It's a new era where your art becomes your evidence. The government has learned how to weaponize creativity, turning lyrics and videos into courtroom exhibits. And the worst part, it works. Montana's family ties and neighborhood roots made him an even bigger target. To the feds, your environment speaks for you. If your block's known for raids, arrests, or busts, they assume you're part of the system, whether you're moving product or just living nearby. Montana's neighborhood had already been hit before, and his growing fame only drew more attention back to it. The moment his name started trending, so did the block that raised him, and the feds were watching every move. Finally, we reach the part most people never see coming: the federal strategy itself. The feds don't waste time chasing after corner players or one-time hustlers. Their mission is far bigger. They want networks, not individuals. They go after people who sit at the crossroads of money, influence, and culture. The ones whose downfall can send ripples through entire communities. And Montana 700? He checked every single box. To prosecutors, he wasn't just a street rapper or a name trending online. He was the bridge between two worlds they've been trying to pull apart for years. By indicting him, they didn't just score a flashy arrest. They gained leverage. Someone with access, reach, and credibility both in the booth and the block. Someone who could, under the right pressure, connect dots for a much larger story. Something Rico style. Something with headlines and convictions that stretch far beyond Dallas. In their eyes, Montana symbolized everything they wanted to control. The merging of music, money, and movement. He was proof that culture could create power outside their system, and that made him dangerous. This wasn't just about alleged crimes anymore. It was about control. And by targeting Montana, the feds weren't just indicting a man. They were sending a message. So when people ask, why Montana? The answer couldn't be clearer. He wasn't just a rapper. They saw him as the statement, the embodiment of what happens when authenticity meets influence in the wrong spotlight. To them, he represented the perfect public example, a face that could explain a complex case to a jury, a figure who could make a federal narrative sound simple. See this? This is what happens when the streets and success collide. They didn't just target what he allegedly did. They targeted who he was. His voice, his visibility, his connection to the culture made him valuable in a different kind of way. He wasn't just another name on a list. He was the headline, the symbol, the man whose image could justify their next crackdown. In their playbook, Montana 700 was never just a suspect. He was a message. His lifestyle was bold, his reputation was respected, and his presence was loud. And when a man like that starts reflecting the raw, unfiltered truth of the streets on a national stage, law enforcement doesn't just watch, they fixate. What started as curiosity turned into obsession, until his every move became another line in their growing case file. Montana's rise now reads like one of hip-hop's oldest and saddest stories. A young man who took pain, poverty, and pressure and turned it into poetry. He came from the trenches, built something out of nothing, and gave people who had nothing to believe in. Fans didn't love him because he was perfect. They loved him because he was real. He didn't pretend to live the life he rapped about. He lived it, breathed it, and recorded it. But that same realness, that authenticity that made him powerful, is now the very thing the feds are twisting into proof. Looking back, the warning signs were there the whole time. The same loyalty and street roots that gave him his foundation also planted seeds of risk. Every connection, every handshake, every mention in a song now sits under a microscope. What once made him respected now makes him vulnerable. His success didn't erase his past, it amplified it. And with fame came exposure, not just from fans, but from federal agents who had already started circling long before the public knew. Now, with the charges officially filed, the government's move is clear. They're using Montana 700 as a lesson. They'll parade his case as proof that influence and illegality can't coexist. To them, he's no longer a musician. He's an example. A warning to every young artist coming up from the same soil. In court, prosecutors will paint him as a poster child for what they call the glamorization of crime in rap. They'll tell the jury his story is exactly why federal crackdowns are necessary, using his fame to fuel their agenda. It's not about justice, it's about narrative. His name, his lyrics, his life. They'll twist it all into a cautionary tale. And when they lay out their evidence, the ties to zillionaire dough, the flashy spending, the coded lyrics, the surveillance footage from his block, they'll turn it into one seamless storyline. A story where they don't see art, they see evidence. They don't see hustle, They see hierarchy, and they don't see a young man trying to make it. They see an opportunity to prove a point, to control the message, to remind everyone watching what happens when your influence grows too fast, too raw and too real for their comfort. To the feds, Montana 700 isn't an artist. He's a case study, a living diagram of what happens when hip-hop and the streets overlap too closely. They'll present him not as a man, but as a symbol, the perfect poster child for their long-standing narrative that rap and criminal enterprise fuel each other. And with federal conviction rates sitting over 90%, the battle ahead isn't just uphill. It's a mountain with no clear path to the top. But the truth is, this story isn't just about Montana. It's about the danger that comes when authenticity turns into liability. Rap has always thrived on realness because fans crave truth. But when that truth comes with real crimes, real connections, and real surveillance, the line between storytelling and self-incrimination gets blurred. What once inspired the world becomes ammunition in a courtroom. The art that built legends now becomes evidence that destroys them. For Montana, every lyric is now a loaded statement. Every Instagram post, every flex, every money phone moment, they're no longer symbols of success. They're pieces of a federal puzzle. Every move he made as an artist is being replayed by prosecutors searching for motive, proof, and guilt. What once represented pride now serves as their playbook for conviction. Now, Montana stands at the crossroads of fate. He's got two roads, and neither offers peace. One path is the long fight, taking it to trial, risking decades behind bars, hoping a jury sees the artist instead of the image the feds created. The other path? A plea deal, trading years for cooperation, potentially giving up more than just time. Maybe giving up trust, respect, even his legacy. Either choice comes with a price no fame can pay. His career, the dream built from nothing, is hanging by a single trembling thread. The same fans who once screamed his lyrics now scroll through updates, torn between loyalty and disbelief. The streets are split, some praying he beats the odds, others quietly whispering that the system already sealed his fate long before the cameras showed up. And as this story unfolds, one haunting question echoes through every corner of the culture. Will Montana 700 survive this federal storm, or become the next cautionary tale of a rapper whose past outran his fame? Because in the world where art imitates life and life bleeds back into art, there's one truth no one escapes. The streets might make you, but the system always comes to collect. As Montana sits behind those steel bars, the world outside continues to debate his legacy. Was he a victim of his environment, or a man who flew too close to the fire? Was he punished for telling his truth, or for living it too boldly? Either way, the impact is undeniable. His case has already become a mirror, reflecting the dark intersection between art, justice, and power in America. One thing's for sure, Montana 700's story doesn't end here. Whether he walks free one day or fades into legend behind those walls, his name has become part of a bigger conversation about what it truly costs to keep it real. The same truth that made him rise could be the truth that brings him down, but it's also what makes his legacy unforgettable. Because in this era, where your lyrics can lock you up faster than your actions, Montana's story stands as a warning and a lesson. Authenticity can build an empire, but it can also build your case file. And for Montana 700, that line between greatness and downfall has never been thinner or louder. So as the final chapter closes, the world watches and waits. Will he make it out to tell his story again? Or will his silence become the final verse of a song the system wrote for him? Whatever the outcome, one thing remains certain. Montana 700's name will echo long after the verdict drops.